Hello everyone. So in this class we will be discussing about the post-independence novelists and in the last class we had discussed about the Gandhian influence in the Indian English literature and we came to know that how the Gandhian influence shaped the writings of Mulk Raj Anand and R.K. Narayan and then Raja Rao's Kantapura. So we see there were these evidences of the Gandhian influence. There were these evidences of non-violence and then abolition of untouchability and such. So in this class we will be discussing about the writers post the Gandhian era. Okay, so what happens? So after the independence, we come to see that there comes a new wave of writers. So these writers basically write about the things based on partition, such as Kushwant Singh's Train to Pakistan, and it defines about the horrors associated with partition, and then Atiya Hussein's Sunlight on a Broken Column. So these are the novels which displays the agonies that are associated with partition. And then we have Manohar Malgaonkar's A Band in the Ganges. And so you see in these novels, what we see is that the socio-political situation during that time is aptly described in the novels, and so it's described, and the post independence scenario is described. And if we see the genre as a whole, it is struck by extreme social realism. So when we say realism, by realism we mean the depiction of society as it is, without any honeycoating and without showing it in a very creative or in a very romantic manner. So what we try to portray society as it is. Okay, we try to portray the evils as well as the good things about the society. So this is, and their writings also showed a lot of social realism in them. And apart from realism, we also see certain other forms of realism in their writing, such as historical realism, psychological realism. So, when we say psychological realism, it tries to depict, the inner psyche of the person as it is. So, a person who depicts psychological realism in the writings, she is Anita Desai, and in Anita Desai's work, we see how she tries to depict the society as it is, and she tries to and capture the inner emotions, the inner thoughts of the protagonist in her writings. And writers such as Nayantara Sehgal and Shashi Deshpande. So these writers focused on the aspect of social realism. So in their works, while depicting social realism, they also depict how the transition in the society also brings about changes in the relationships of the family. And you see, Nayantara Sehgal also, she writes about the political situation of the country, so which becomes as a metaphor for her fiction. So in her writings such as Rich Like Us, so she tries to depict how the Indian political situation affects a certain family. And in the writings of Anita Desai, we see social realism as well as psychological realism. And so I would like to recite some lines from an article written by Anita Desai, and this article is named as Indian Writers' Problems. So she wrote in this article, by writing novels that had been catalogued by critics as psychological and that are purely subjective, I have been left free to employ simply the language of the interior. So by the language of the interior, what does she means? The language of the psyche or the human mind. And yeah, okay. Even when the two characters meet, they use this particular type of language, the language of their thoughts, their interior selves, which has nothing to do with geography and can be written in any language. So, you see, this is how she depicts psychological realism in her novels, where and this language of the interior self is something which really appeals to the readers, and also the reader could relate themselves with the political situation because that is something which they had been experiencing during that time of the partition. And Anita Desai, in her Sahitya Academy award winning novel The Fire on the Mountain, so that novel depicts the predicament of women that fail to satisfy their desires and hopes from the society. And there is a need that women should support each other. And if you see one more important aspect of the post independence novels, so you see, post independence novels are synonymous with post colonial novels. Okay, so when you say post colonial, so if you try to trace back the existence of post colonial, it is also after 1947, and post independence novel, this is also after the after India got its independence. So both are same, you have to remember. So if you are given to categorize them, so you should remember that post colonial writers and post independence writings are similar. And so you see, so one more genre that was very much evident during that time was magic realism. So it is still a very widely used literary genre, and it is used by Salman Rushdie in his writings such as The Midnight's Children and then Haroun and the Sea of Stories. So you see, through the aspect of magic, so you see, right, what is the purpose of magic realism. So what does magic realism tries to portray? It tries to portray an inherent satire, isn't it? And so Salman Rushdie also, by trying to show certain magical characters in the Heron and the Sea of Stories. So he tries to depict the current political scenario where people were not, being allowed to voice their opinions. So this is how Salman Rushdie wrote certain things regarding to speech during his exile. And as you know that Salman Rushdie is in exile. And if you see, if you take the instances of mythical realism or historical realism, then we can date back to Amitabh Ghosh's novels such as The Shadow Lines and then The Glass Palace. And so you see, these novels I have also history embedded in them. And also we have to see that Amitabh Ghosh is a writer from the diaspora. And so, since in the last class I have told you about what is diaspora and what are the themes associated with diaspora, so Amitabh Ghosh is also one of the writers from the diaspora who doesn't stay in his native. And in his novel In an Antique Land, so there also he speaks a lot about the historical realism. So he tries to intermingle history with fiction, and this is how the novelists of the post independence era, they try to experiment with certain genres after the independence. So, after the independence, we also see a certain rise in feminist criticisms and gender studies. And if we take into account the writings of Arundhati Roy and how she boldly represents the women's choices in her novel The God of Small Things, and Manju Kapoor is also there, who talks about lesbian relationships and also love between the same sexes. So these were the very much bold and daring content in respect to the conservative times of the Indian society. And certain novels, such as The Train to Pakistan, was written as a backdrop of the partition, and it was a novel of violence, revenge, hatred, betrayal. And so you see, these were the certain aspects which were included in the novels of the post independence era. So that's all for today's class. And if you have any questions, do let me know. So, for the post independence novels, what you have to remember is what are the themes associated with it, and who are these post independence or the post colonial writers, and what are the subjects that they deal with. So these are the important issues, and also you have to remember certain works of them, and you have to have a brief overview of that work so that you can include them in your answers, and that is how you should prepare. And I think that should be done by this class. And if you have any questions, so do let me know. Thank you.